Good evening and a warm welcome to all educators joining us today. We'll just wait for a minute for everyone, all of us to join. On behalf of Center, we're delighted to have you with us for another insightful session in our ongoing Center series for teachers, a space where passionate educators come together to learn, reflect, and grow professionally. We're proud to share that we recently celebrated our 300th Cent Talk, and today we welcome you to the next milestone, the 308th Cent Talk. Your presence and participation continue to inspire us as we build a stronger, more empowered teaching community. This evening's session addresses a deeply important and timely topic that affects every educator, regardless of experience or role. The topic is empowering learners through inquiry, autonomy, and art. Now, it's our pleasure to introduce the facilitator for the transformative session, Ms. Jyoti Tiwari. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
We're pleased to welcome Ms. Jyoti Tiwari, an inspiring English educator and a dynamic academic leader with over 5 years of impactful experience. Currently serving as a TGT English and Middle School Coordinator at SAIT Anandram Jaipur School, Lucknow. She is known for her innovative learner-centric methods aligned with NEP 2020, empowering students through creativity, communication, and autonomy. A published author of River, the Hue of You, she brings storytelling into her pedagogy, making language learning meaningful and memorable. Her excellence has been recognized with the TAG 2025 Special Recognition Award for Quality Education and Inspiring Teacher of the Year at IIC New Delhi. Also, participants, please share your queries and insights throughout the session and participate in the polls. We're open for 30 seconds. The polls are open for 30 seconds. Now, back to the session. Welcome, Ms. Jyoti Tiwari. We're handing over the stage to you.
Thank you so much. So before beginning it, I would just like to ask, I think I'm encountering some glitch. Is the camera working? Am I visible to all of you? Hello? Am I audible to each one of you? Muskan ma'am, if you could confirm once if I'm audible. All right. Thank you. So, first of all, a, a thank you to Ms. Muskan for such a generous introduction and a very warm welcome to all the participants who've enrolled for this session. I truly hope that by the end of it, we are on the same page and take some learning back when it comes to inquiry, autonomy, and art. So, these particular three words that you see in today's webinar, inquiry, autonomy, and art, are some things that I try to imbibe and I try to make a part of every lesson that I teach. And it is with this particular aim in mind that I have planned to conduct today's webinar with you people. Now, before we move ahead, before we actually dive into what inquiry means, how can we foster autonomy, and how is art a medium of reflection and a way to extract responses from students, here are certain insights that I'd like to share with you. Now, if you just go through these particular researches, of course, there are n number of them, but for the time being, I've collated five. So these are certain insights which tell you as to what are those strategies, what are those ways which makes the learners thrive. Apart from conventional, apart from rote learning methods, what are those basic things that educators can do, or something that educators can bring into the classroom so as to make the learners thrive? If you look at the very first one, correct questioning boosts critical thinking and comprehension, which simply means that the students who are asked well framed, open ended questions are most likely to analyze, infer, and retain what they need. The second one talks about how arts integrated literature teaching enhances engagement and understanding, which means that when students draw, when they dramatize, or when they create something around literature, they are able to connect emotionally and cognitively, which deepens their understanding, which is very, very different from how rote learning works. When we talk of the third one, student autonomy encourages ownership and lifelong learning habits. What we mean to say by this is that when students are given choices and voices, I mean, there is no teacher talk that is simply happening. There is no lecture based method that the teacher is adopting. When the students have a choice, when the students have a voice, and when they are choosing books or when they are responding creatively, they tend to engage more, and as a result of this, they tend to retain more. Now, once we have done these three things, the fourth one is something which I especially find interesting, which says that metacognition and autonomy go hand in hand. And this implies that autonomy, or a sense of independence in the classrooms, helps children become reflective thinkers who can take charge of their own learning. They are not solely dependent on the facilitator in the class, or any person for that matter. They know where they're going and they row the roadmap for it. The last one here, multimodal teaching, which means inclusivity of art, of text, and of talk, helps to build vocabulary and fluency. And this implies that when art, when music, when movement, when drama, role play, peer teaching, when some kind of an active methodology comes into play in the classroom alongside literature, it boosts vocabulary, it boosts fluency, and of course, the learner's confidence is something which is a byproduct of it. Now, that we've seen certain insights, and before we move further into the webinar, here's a quick question I'd like to ask all of you. And for that, I'd request if the poll could be played. We'll move ahead once we see as to what your responses and what your understanding is when it comes to autonomy. Can we have the first poll question? Ma'am, I think you're on mute.
So sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. So the poll is up and we have the results as well. So the question asked was, what does student autonomy mean to you? 53% people have chosen freedom to choose how they learn. 35% have opted ability to self-access and reflect. 7% have chosen responsibility for setting goals, whereas 3% have chosen independence in time and task.
Oh, wow. That means the highest one here is freedom to choose how they learn.
Right.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am. And I'm glad that most of you have chosen this option. Although I was skeptical that some of you would have the third one, ability to self-assess and reflect, also as one of the most common answers. But nonetheless, I'm really happy to see that this is what you people believe in, and it is just a testament to a fact that all of us are doing things in the right direction. But yes, all of us at some point of time need insights, we need new ways, and I'm hopeful that by the time we finish this webinar, every one of you will walk away with at least one thing to take. Now that we've discussed the evidences, here is something I'd like to start with. Now, being an English teacher, what's most important for me are the kind of questions that are put in the classroom. If we talk about a story, if we talk about drama, if we talk about poetry, I feel that the content here is the least important thing. What is of utmost importance is what the learners take back once you've finished that particular lesson, story, poem, drama, whatever it is. Are they able to think independently, critically? And are they able to view things with diverse perspectives? And if they are not being restricted to one particular notion or that preconceived notion that they already had before you began the lesson. For this, here's a quick exercise. Let's do that. And then we'll see how this simple comprehension passage can translate into something which reflects ethical and reflective questions. Here goes. So the passage says, a 10-year-old student named Meera brings a storybook to school that she borrowed from her older brother. It's a fantasy novel with dragons, battles, and magic spells. She reads it quietly during free time. One day, a classmate asks to read the book too. Soon, others join in. They start asking the teacher if they can have time to read exciting books like Mira's instead of the simpler ones from the class library. The English teacher is concerned. While she loves their enthusiasm, she feels the book may be too mature for their age and not aligned with the curriculum. At the same time, the school librarian believes any reading that sparks interest should be encouraged, even if it is above the grade level. Now, this is not a fancy passage, something very basic, something very simple. And I don't think there would be any student in the class who would not be able to comprehend this particular passage, or who will not be able to answer questions that you would be posing once you do this. But the kind of questions that are put can really, really make a difference. Anybody who sees this passage would think that this is something which is very apt for a fourth grader, a fifth grader, or a sixth grader. But if you sit back and analyze the kind of questions that can be framed out of it, I think that is something striking. A simple passage, and here goes. Ethical questions and reflective questions. In place of simply asking who the main character was, what was her age, what did she borrow, what was the thought of the English teacher, what did the library teacher think, we could have ethical and reflective questions which triggers some kind of thought in the minds of the students, and they sit and reflect and maybe come up with something really, really different. One example of such a question could be, who is right? Is Mira right, the teacher, or the librarian? And now that you've chosen one, why? Mira is the one to read different books. The teacher thinks that it is too hard for her grade level. The librarian thinks reading should be encouraged, not concerning what the level is. So, out of these three people here, who is the right one? Who is wrong and why? The other question, is there such a thing that a book is too early for a child to read, even if they're interested? Do we actually have a concept of too early? And if we have it, is it right? What do students infer from too early? what is their understanding of maturity that they gain, which makes them eligible to read certain texts. Third one, should students be allowed to read beyond their grade level if they're curious? Or should reading always be structured? This kind of a question could also be a prompt for a healthy discussion or a healthy debate that takes place in your classroom. The next one, what matters more in the classroom? Engagement or alignment? I think it would be really nice to hear what students think about it. Here you will get to understand what the psychology of your students is. What do they feel? Is alignment of utmost importance, or is engagement equally important? The last one, what would you do as the English teacher in the situation? If the students were asked to be in the shoes of that English teacher, what kind of responses do you think they would give you? So, a simple passage like this can be shifted into an altogether different frame. Ethical, reflective, Socratic kind of questions can be made out of it. The reason why I'm showing this passage to you is if something as simple as this can be translated into questions like these, which question ethics, that questions moral dilemma, that question integrity, imagine what scope do we have when it comes to richer texts. So, questioning, as title says, inquiry, art, and autonomy, the very first part of it, inquiry, this is what I mean by it. And the reason why we ask questions is to spark debate, to have a sense of disagreement, because it is then that the students actually begin to voice out what they feel. Discussion, of course, because these are the hallmarks of any good literature class. Questions emphasize how much has the child been able to understand, and it simply does not end with content retention. Questions also model real world situations, and of course, as I said earlier, ethical thinking and deeper conversations will always be byproducts of your class if you know what kind of questions to be asked. Now, once I've said this, once we've discussed as to what is the purpose of asking questions, we come to the fact that it's not the answer but the questions that enlightens the child, the classroom, and their thinking process. Questions are seeds of curiosity because they train the minds to think and not to simply remember. A well framed question invites imagination, reflection, and deeper understanding, whereas a question that is just a surface level one or a question that simply tests the remembering would not take you far. Maybe the child will end up scoring good, but then there will be no practical use that the child will be making out of the poem, out of the story, out of the drama that you've taught. And that is the last thing we want from our students. That is why, in the English classrooms, since stories are portals, questions are the keys, you shouldn't be asking, what is that thing that happened? Your question should be, why do you think that happened? What should be replaced with why, with what ifs, altering situations, and that is what will instill your students a sense of purpose. Conversations will be richer, and even if there are disagreements, they get a voice. Now that we've seen how questions can be framed, how important they are, one thing which I feel all of us will benefit from is, apart from the questioning skills that you have, apart from the things that you ask students, your own kind of conversations with them, your own feedbacks can prove to be game changers. When you're speaking to them, when you're giving them instructions, you should always be mindful of using words, phrases, sentences that gives them a wow moment. For example, if you're asking the students to jot down something, in place of simply saying that now it's time to write, take your notebooks out, grab your pencils, and we'll be noting this today, you can have phrases like, you can have sentences like, let's dive into our writing and like explorers and discover a whole new world. Let's dive right in and become adventurous. Pick up your pencils, it's time to paint with words. Things like these simple statements will make your child believe that you, as a teacher, are not simply interested in imparting what the concerns of the lessons are, but are equally interested in doing that at your own pace and giving them examples while you set the tone for the class. When you speak to them, be very mindful of what are the words, what are the phrases, what are the kind of sentences you are using in your own class, because children consciously, unconsciously, deliberately, or just like that absorb phrases which they hear repeatedly over time, and that becomes a part of their own vocabulary mechanism. Over time, when the students are continuously listening to how their teacher speaks, it becomes a part of their own spoken and written expression. Simply here, in place of saying, good job, you've done very well, things like you nailed it like a pro, that idea sparkled like fireworks, your words danced off the page. Imagine the kind of happiness your child would have hearing these things from you, and would he or would she not try to imitate that later on? It's when a teacher uses rich, expressive language, students naturally mirror it. Your words become their models for writing, for speaking, and for storytelling, because, of course, who does not want to be like their favorite teacher? It's when you're talking to them, your instruction delivery, even your normal day to day conversations have to be so rich that the students feel the need and urgency of picking up from there, right? So, once now that we've seen inquiry, that we've had a couple of things about how feedback should be given, this is something I'm particularly interested in. Our topic said inquiry, autonomy, and art. We've seen the inquiry part of it, how questions can really foster a deeper sense of purpose, how correct feedbacks can make them believe that yes, words, phrases, sentences, vocabulary is a matter of concern and not a random thing for that matter. It is now that we come to art integration. And before we dive in any further, can I just ask Muskan ma'am to have the second poll here before we move with the art integration part? If the second poll could be there.
The poll is up, ma'am. The second poll was, what type of questions do your students ask most often? The we have the results. 50% of the participants say it's conceptual. They seek conceptual questions more often. 26% ask reflective questions of what if, what next. 19% ask factual questions of what and when, whereas 3% they rarely ask any questions.
All right, thank you. It's good to see that we've got variety in the audience. Of course, yes, students are different, they have different learning needs. But yes, if your students are rarely asking questions, one thing that I believe will work for you is putting them into the shoes of the protagonist, the antagonist, into one of the characters, and asking them as to what would they do had they been in that situation. Try that out once, and maybe things change for you. Now, coming to this particular segment, art integration. If you look at this image, some of you must be wondering as to why is it placed there. What is the use of this? What difference is it going to make? It does make a lot of difference. We, as English teachers, walk into the classroom knowing that this is the story to be done today, this is the poem that needs to be done today, this is the drama that needs to begin. But what we end up doing is giving all resources, giving each and everything to the student as if it was displayed on a platter. And that is something which brings their interest and a sense of autonomy down in the classroom. Therefore, images, paintings, pictures, abstract ones are beautiful portals to make the students express as to what they truly feel. What is that comes to their mind when they see these images? And from there, combining all of the responses that you get from a classroom, you can ask students to simply, maybe in words, in phrases, tell you as to what they feel, and then combining all of them together, you can arrive at a common theme. And it is then that you can tell them, yes, this is what the theme of today's lesson is. For example, if you show this picture to them, I'm very sure there would be a number of responses you will get. Students would say multiplicity, somebody would say surreal, somebody would say it is a kind of a chaos, somebody would say emotions, somebody would maybe come up with identity. Somebody would say there's this overlapping and clashing of colors. Somebody would say it's fragmented, it's fluid. Somebody would think it is something which is dreamy. Somebody would say there are multiple people in a single person. Somebody would say multiple rational, practical, pragmatic thoughts. And any lesson that you have in your syllabus which relates to all of these kinds of images can be used. You already know as a teacher what the theme is, you already know what the lesson contains, so why not instill a sense of autonomy and curiosity and make the students respond, make the students answer as to what do they feel for that particular image, and then link it with what your lesson is. If you look at this particular image here in the classroom, if you have any particular lesson that deals with imagination, that deals with expression, with energy, with transformation, with liberation, with change, with growth, with evolving identity, with limitless thinking, where the face and the flowing lines symbolize thoughts and feelings, vibrancy, inner drive. If you have any lesson, any poem, any story that deals with these themes or sub themes, this or a similar picture like this would be a great start. If you look at this particular image and you show it to your students before even telling them what the lesson is about, it has got to do something with obscurity, disarray, emotions, impression, inner world, an entire landscape, passion, turmoil, lack of order, confusion, mystery, concealment. If you have lessons that deal with with these themes, sub themes, emotions, plots, these kinds of images can come into play. If you look at this one, you see books, you see a candle. People will come out with things like knowledge, illumination, sacrifice, legacy, hope, passing on of information from one generation to the next, clarity, enlightenment, undying spirit could be a great conversation starter. If you look at this particular image in the classroom, students will come up with things like duality, facade, fragmentation, vibrancy, perception, dynamic expression, where colors are reflecting life, a brave front, conflicting sides. So if you've got themes or sub themes like these, this can be of practical use. This is something that will evoke a lot of discussion. If you show this particular image to them, they'll come up with things like oppression, power dynamics, they'll come up with resistance, with awakening, with inequality, of how inequality and equality differ from what we called equity. So, if you have lessons that pertain to these themes, images like these could be of great help. We do not need to serve everything to the child on the platter. Abstract images will make them think, will make them look beyond the conventional, will make them answer something which is not obvious, and it is then that you get the pulse of the child. You understand that this is the kind of vocabulary my student has. Maybe he's able to think but not process and speak it out. You'll know that this is the direction in which the brain of my child works, and this is how I need to diverge that. Students will know that they will not be taught simply what is there as per the content, but will know that they will get ample time to voice out what they feel. They know that their teacher into the classroom will walk with something amazing. It will not be conventional. And here, through images, through paintings, through abstract art, they'll be able to tell you as to what they truly believe in, what their perceptions are, and you'll be able to analyze if they come from a very rigid frame of mind or if they are people who are open to things. So it's not just about seeking responses, it is also a medium of getting to know what your students actually feel about what your students think and where is it that their mind is flowing, what direction is that. So art integration, I feel, is a wonderful way to get things started. You always do not need to give them examples and tell them exactly what the theme of the lesson is. Bring a picture with you which has got something to do but is abstract in nature. It does not tell the student directly as to what is the underlying theme or what is the moral, what is the message, what is the plot twist, how is the protagonist like, how is the antagonist like. No, let them think, and you can always pick from there. Now that we have done this, just give me a minute. If we could have the third pole at place.
The poll is up, ma'am, and we also have the results. The question was, where do you integrate art in learning? The options were during project based learning, which is 34% of the participants have chosen during project based learning. 28% of the participants have chosen using visual thinking strategies. 20% of the participants have chosen in reflective writing, whereas 16% of the participants have chosen as a tool for assessment.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. So I think most of you have chosen project-based learning as the correct response. Of course, all of them are correct. There are no wrong options. But the reason why we have this particular poll question here is the next time when you are assigning maybe a homework, when you have assessments at place, when you have your internal scoring, when you're giving projects to students, in place of having the conventional questions that we always give, try to give them images and ask them to interpret and reflect as to what comes to their mind and how can they see that image in a way that is not conventional and obvious. It will not only help them to be aware of their own thoughts, you as a teacher will get to know your students better. I think you should be trying this because initially This is something I did not very well believe in. But since the past few years that I've been doing this in my classroom, I feel I've been able to understand my students better, and they're able to come up with responses that earlier weren't there. So this has worked for me. I hope you can implement and make it work for you too. Now, beads. Before we begin with it, now that we've talked as to how to introduce a particular lesson, be it a story, poem, drama, prose, anything for that matter, we also need to know that the role of the teacher in the classroom is not to simply teach, to simply convey, or to simply impart information. No. I think in today's world, where things are changing, evolving rapidly, the needs of the learners are also changing. It is not the same classroom that used to be there 20 years back. We know learners have different needs, so why are we still sticking to the old conventional regimes and methods? When we say that we need to instill a sense of independence, when we say that we need to instill a sense of autonomy in the classrooms, we need to make them independent, autonomous learners, are we really doing that? Or is it something just on paper and in words? Is it something which is there in letter but not in spirit? How many of us, how many of teachers, how many of, it's not simply about English. If we randomly ask a question to all the teachers out there, how many of us can actually be very sure and say that if I hand over this lesson to my child, I have given him enough basic knowledge, I've imparted her with enough basic stuff so as to get started with any lesson for that matter, especially when we talk of literature. Do we as teachers feel the need to teach each and every story, each and every poem to the student to ensure that they know it well? Or can we be sure that even if we are not the ones teaching but facilitating, they'll be able to do equally well? Can we ask that question to ourselves and can we be sure of it? Are you confident as English teachers that if you display any random poem on the screen or any random text for that matter, the students will be able to derive proper meanings out of it? Are you sure that they will be able to understand what the structure is, what the form is, what is the right to convey, what is the main idea, where is the beginning, what is his conclusion? If yes, that's, I think, the greatest thing, nothing better. But if not, here is one strategy. It's called BEATS. BEATS is basically an acronym that stands for B, beginning, E is ending, A is annotation, D is devices, and S here stands for structure. When we talk of BEATS, this is one acronym that you can give your students, and once you've made them thorough with this, the next time you walk into the classroom, if you've say assigned 4 periods for one particular poetry, one period of it can be solely given to the students where they, at their own pace, using their own thoughts, with their own imagination, frame and carve out what is it that the poem or the poet is trying to convey. Now, how does this work? For example, here on your screens, you must be seeing a poem. It's called My Shadow, written by Robert Louis Stevenson. Of course, this is not the full poem. I've just extracted 2 stanzas out of it. It says, I have a little shadow that goes in and out with me, and what can be the use of him is more than I can see. He's very, very like me from the heels up to the head. and I see him jump before me when I jump into my bed. The funniest thing about him is the way he likes to grow. Not all, not at all like proper children, which is always very slow. For he sometimes shoots up taller, like an all India rubber ball, and he sometimes gets so little that there's none of him at all. Now, if this particular poem was, say, suppose given to a fourth grader, a third grader, or any other poem for that matter to maybe a 10th grader, do you think the students will be able to understand what the gist, what the crux, what the idea, what the theme, what the meaning, what the moral, what the message of the poem is, the structure, the rhyme, the meters, the meanings of things unsaid? Will they be able to point it out on their own? If yes, you've done your job. And if not, this is one strategy. When we talk of beats, in which B stands for beginning, you need to make the students clear of the fact that when they have a poem in front of you, the first question that they need to ask themselves is, what is the opening mood or the idea of the poem? What's the tone? Is there a sense of imagery? What are the first thoughts that the poem presents? Give it to them. Let them sit with that particular piece and let them understand, let them infer on their own as to what do they feel is the tone, what do they feel is the thing that the poet is picking up with, what is it that they feel conveys the mood or idea. And once they've done that, once they have a slight understanding of how the poem has begun, or what is the initial tone, or what is the initial theme, or what is the initial main idea of the poem, is when you tell them to quickly come to the ending part of it and try to understand on their own, for their own selves, as to how does the poem conclude. The kind of emotions that the poem has towards the end of it, are they in lines, are they in terms, are they in agreement to what they were when it began? Do we see a shift there? If yes, they'll be able to instantly understand that the poem has not been written by the poet in one mood or in one tone or from a single perspective, but it's got variety to it. It is then that they know that, okay, this is how my poem started, this was the initial theme, this was the tone, and by the end of it, this is how it has changed. This is the thought that it leaves me with. Ask them to wrap up as to what they feel is the final twist, and to observe if there have been any mood shifts or if there have been any kind of differences in how it concludes and how it began. They already know half of it. When we talk about the next letter of the acronym, which says annotation, ask the students to highlight key lines, and not just highlight, but to try to understand what is the reason that the poet seems to have written this particular word, this particular phrase, and what would have been the situation in case if this was substituted with a word that meant completely the opposite. Ask them to look for deeper meanings. Ask them to look for those specific parts of the poem which they otherwise would omit. Ask them to understand symbols if they are able to find any, allusions. Ask them to look for emotional undertones. Of course, all of this might be slightly on a tougher side when you do it for the very first time in the classroom. But once your student knows that my teacher is not simply going to dive into the theme straight away and give me a comprehensive explanation of what the stanzas deal with, but will ask me through this strategy beads, through this acronym, as to what I think is the beginning, as to what I think is the ending, as to how can I annotate and find out differences, emotional undertones, symbols in the story, in the poem. It is then that they will start to put their brain to exercise. B, of course, beginning, E, ending, A, annotation, D, here stands for devices. Ask your students to find out on their own as to what are the poetic devices that have been used. Not just devices. Ask them to find out if any kind of an emotional impact, rhythm, tool has been used by the poet to enhance its literary appeal. Does the poem seem to be ironic, or is it an example of something which is written maybe for the purpose of entertainments? If your student is able to walk through this, the beginning, the ending, the annotation, the devices part of it, I think 50% of your job is done. The next time, in the next class, when you take this poem up, the child already has a broader horizon. He or she will be able to then clearly absorb as to what you're trying to convey, and will be able to put his own thoughts at place and maybe correlate both of them and come up with something unique of his or her own. Once the beginning part of it, once the ending part of it, once the annotation, the devices, all of this has been either completely chalked out or at least attempted by the student, is when you switch to the last letter of the acronym, which is structure, which asks the students as to how is the poem organized, what is the arrangement of the stanzas, what do they feel about the rhyme scheme, is there any, if yes, does it contribute to the mood of the poem, if not, does it make any difference? Ask them about the line length. Ask them about the use of punctuations. Ask them, do we have examples of enjambment? If yes, how does it make a difference? Ask them if repetition is one thing that has been employed by the poet. How does it contribute to the overall meaning? Ask them to interpret what the flow of the poem is and to tell you as to what did they experience while they were trying to put all of that in place. Initially, when you do this for a couple of poems, it might be overwhelming. The students might have no idea as to how to get started with it. But then, few poems down the line, when they get a hang of it, any random poem that is given to them leaves them with a scope to use their own imagination and to at least try to find out what the meaning is and not rely completely on the instructions of the teacher and wait for her or him to simply come and give all the things to them in a platter. So, this is something you could employ in the classrooms, and maybe check for yourselves if your students are actually at a stage wherein they could be employing all of this and can be coming out with meanings when you are not the one telling them. If I quickly put all of that into place, we began with inquiry as to how asking the right kind of questions sparks a thought process. Even if there are debates and disagreements, how does it ignite the imagination of the child? How does it make the child think? And how is he no longer simply a roll number in the class, but a being who's very aware of what he's learning, why he's learning, and how he's learning? When we talk of inquiry, we relate that to art, how images, paintings, abstract drawings could be used as a trigger displayed on the board, and the students can simply be asked to voice out as to what they feel when they look at it. Connect the dots, have a sense of collaboration, and then arrive at what you think is truly the theme of your lesson. When we talk about poetry, specifically, the use of this particular acronym, BEADS, beginning, ending, annotation, devices, and structure, is something which will instill in your students a sense of autonomy. They will know how to go about a poem, how to understand that there could be mood shifts, and how does it contribute to the overall undertone. And once you begin doing all of this, literature no more remains monotonous. It becomes a space where everybody, as I initially said in the previous slides, has a choice, has a voice, has a sense of independence, and walks back with something concrete and something which very well belongs to them. Literature classrooms should be such that when the student walks out of it, he knows that now there is one presumption that has been eradicated, there is one myth, one notion that has been busted. I've got to know something, or I've been invited to look at a certain thing with a fresh new perspective that was not existing prior to this particular class. Questions are portals, images can be triggers, and the implementation of this particular strategy beads could be a game changer for your English classrooms. And the fact that I've put all of these three is because they've been personally tried and tested by me in my classrooms. And over the time, I've noticed the shift that the students have when it comes to them. I'd like to have the last poll question here.
The poll is up, ma'am. We're waiting for the participants to respond.
Yeah.
Dear participants, please take some time and respond to the polls that is uploaded on the chat section. So we have the results for the poll, ma'am. The question asked was, what will you take back to your classroom first? 48% of the participants have chosen promote student-led inquiries skills. 17% have chosen enable students' choice and voice. 17% have chosen plan real-world cross-subject tasks, whereas 15% have opted for use art to deepen subject learning.
All right. Thank you. I'm really happy to know that the right kind of questioning skills is what you will take back. And yes, questions, if framed correctly, can do wonders. And if not, will make the students stand at the very low level, at the lowest level when we talk of Bloom's taxonomy, that is remembering. And that really does not make a difference when they walk out of the classroom. The lesson is the least important thing, what they learn out of it, and the kind of ways they are able to implement that lesson, the practicalities of it, the nuances of it, are what make real differences. And this is where I wrap up with what my presentation was, leaving you with this thought that it's not that the mind is a vessel to be filled, it is a fire that needs to be kindled. Let's light that fire book by book and question by question. It's not that our aim is to be the one standing in the classroom lecturing the students. But in today's world, we need to act more as facilitators, as people who are guiding and showing them the way while they are the ones learning, doing, and implementing what you think is the best for them. And with this, that's all from my side.
Thank you so much, Jyoti ma'am. The session was very engaging and informative. I think all of the teachers will agree with me. And we have a lot of takeaways from the sessions too. So, we have a few questions from the audience. May I, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Thank you. Krishna Tinku has asked, should students be encouraged to take learning decisions? Should they take their own learning decisions?
Okay, see, when we talk about learning decisions, it could be of two types. One could be where the student decides that this is what I want to learn, and this is that I'm particularly not interested in. The second scenario would be where the student knows that yes, this is my lesson, this is what I need to know, this is of critical importance to me, but the other parts of it are also equally important. I think not just for students, but for teachers too, they need to have an agenda in mind before they begin with any lesson for that matter. It's not simply about English. When it comes to mathematics, when it comes to social sciences, when it comes to sciences, when it comes to Hindi, when it comes to computers, anything, you need to have a learning roadmap, you need to have an agenda at place, and you need to be able to spot the difference as to what you think is important for you, but also realize that the other things are equally linked to that. Yes, they should be given that sense of autonomy, they should be able to make their own learning decisions, but then you should be there to facilitate and guide them and to tell them that this is what they can choose for themselves, but this is something which they cannot be skipping altogether at all. So, this is.
Rightly said, ma'am, and I totally agree with that as well. So the next question is, what will be the role of the learners during a thinking starter for a teacher?
Okay, so I think when we talk about the thinking starter, they are, I think, asking about the image or the art integration part of it. Right? So, what needs to be done, for example, if I walk into a classroom and I think the teachers here, for example, if I take one of the most famous poems of all times, if I take The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost, if I walk into that classroom, we as teachers already know that the theme here discusses about the road that was not taken, about the importance of choices in life, and how we end up either regretting or being happy of the things that we made a decision about. We know that. But when we talk of thinking starters, we need not give this to the students at the first place. You even do not need to disclose what is the title, what is that going to begin in today's class. Have an image with you, have a quote, have a video with you, which directly or passively hints at what the lesson is about, and let them arrive at their own set of conclusions. Pick from where they have left, combine that answer, ask them to collaborate, collectively have sentences, and then tell them that yes, they were right. This is what the theme is. And once they have this sense of winning, that yes, this was one abstract thing my teacher showed me, and I've been able to answer that, I am the one who was right, they will listen to you with utmost interest, which might be skipped in case if you simply walked into the classroom telling them that this is what we're going to discuss today, this is the theme, and let's now begin with what with what the content is. So I think it makes a real difference there.
Right. So we're taking one last question. How do we get younger kids in classes 2 to 4 work with images?
Okay, So here, I think the kind of images that I showed on the screen, if I could show them once again, just give me a minute. Yes. So if you look at the kind of images I showed here, this is something which has got to do with students who are slightly on a maturer level, people who are able to interpret something that is not obvious. But yes, these kinds of images will not work when you talk about students who particularly belong to the primary grades. For them, you need to ensure that there is, apart from the abstract, something that is direct, something that is conventional, for they, so that they are able to at least begin with the answers, and later on, of course, you can have your own set of interpretations. These kinds of images, abstract ones, work wonders when it comes to senior students, people who are able to see beyond the conventional. But yes, when you talk of primary learners, you always need to have an element which is direct, but not very actively involved with what theme or with what your story or poem contains. Have pictures, but do not go for abstract ones. Pick something which is more on the concrete side, something which lends them space and is easily inferable. If you pick out something which is simply abstract, which has got to do with a lot of emotions and colors and a lot of mingling around, it won't work for them. They need to have something which is direct and not actually passive.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am, for clarifying all the questions from the participants. The session was very informative. I hope all the teachers have enjoyed the session and have a lot of takeaways too. Thank you once again, ma'am.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure hosting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dear participants, we see a lot of queries regarding the participation certificates. Please write to us at centa.org. We will reply to you back within 48 hours. Now, if you have registered and filled out the feedback form for the session, you can check your participation record on the My Centa Learning app. I'll guide you to the steps to download the certificates. Step 1, open the Centa app on your device. Navigate to the ongoing webinar session. Click on Submit Feedback. Please note that this option will be only available at 6 p.m. It is available now on the app. At the end of this session, we have shared a 4-digit feedback code, which is 5688. I repeat the code, it's 5688. Enter the code on the app in the feedback section. Once you've completed the feedback, you will receive the email, you will receive the certificate on your email immediately. This new process was introduced to streamline your experience and ensure the participation is instantly recognized. Thank you for actively participating in today's session. We truly appreciate your engagement. To register for upcoming sessions, please head to the Centa app. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.